Hi, everyone. We're back for part two. I've got with me Gary from Alternative Interactions. Oh boy, look, my mind. I just came back from lunch. I'm not here yet. I'm still at lunch. And then Sonia from Tree of Knowledge. Yeah. So we left off right at a very pivotal point, and that was the last reset that we experienced, big reset. And before we start, I'm going to add this memory that came back to me several years ago. Um, and then we'll kick off from there. So I woke up one morning and I had all these flooding memories coming, and like somebody who has amnesia. Someone who has amnesia will have flashbacks of their life. You can call them flashbacks. I had that because this is nothing but a dream. And we're in a dream within a dream. And when you wake up inside of this dream, which is the waking up, you become lucid. This is us being lucid in the dream. Well, I had this dream where I was underground. There was a whole city underground, memory, flashbacks. And it was, the lighting was like twilight the whole time. There was no day, no night. It was always twilight. You could see that we were in like a huge caving system, but there were buildings inside of here. Looks like buildings out here, but no glass. It was like the old Antiquitech buildings, but under the ground. And we all had little apartments. I don't recall any children. Everybody was older. Okay, it was really weird. We had extended lifetimes. So we were older and we just kept living, but no replacements, no children, no children. So I remember somebody coming over to my apartment and everything was a bit dusty. There was always dust everywhere being underground. There's dust everywhere. It's not clean. It's not like here where you can clean, get rid of the dust. Our air was filtrated. The filtration systems seemed like they were getting older. So I don't know how long we were underground for. I remember there was a point where the time clocks went off and it was time to surface. So we all gathered into these big elevators, and they were a form of elevator. Not like elevators when you go into a building. These elevators were open, where they were just like metal, and you could see through it like fencing, like I don't know what it is, mesh. And we just went up. It was really weird. When we finally got up, the wall started to change into metal, smooth metal. And it was like when we hit this point where the metal became smooth, then we became more encased in the elevator. The air quality started changing. And then when the doors finally opened to the room that we were going into, it was a huge area. It was like walking into the space age. Everything was clean, hermetically clean. Plastic was pristine. There was plastic, there was metal, it was all shining and silver. There was glass, like a real thick glass that even bullets couldn't penetrate through, and it was topside. And it was when we ended up going in there, I saw all this like technology. It was embedded in the walls, and it was like an entrance points to go down. It was so weird. Between down where we were, it felt like dirty buildings. They were just like concrete. It was so different than what we went up to in the top. I realized that when we had gone up there and then we touched the door and the doors just slid open like on Star Trek. When you walk outside, you can't even see it. It's all hidden. It's camouflaged. It's in some kind of frequency where it's not even there for you. It just looks like there's nothing there. You step back into the doors and what the hell? And you can see out all this glass around you. But on the outside, this place doesn't even exist. It looks like a mountain. It looks just like a mountain. You would not know this is not a mountain. This is a structure. So when we had gone out, there were little vehicles, high technology vehicles that you could take out because they had bigger doors that opened. And the way the vehicles were, they looked like three-wheelers, something like that. And some of them looked a little bit bigger and they were like a car, but they didn't look like our cars at all. They didn't look anything like our cars. It kind of like, mm, they were more boxy looking, very boxy looking. So we ended up going in a car, and then there were makeshift roads, what was left of them. They were all dirted over, but they were still no vegetation on it. The vegetation was coming back. The reason the clocks had gone off is because everything would be on topside, would have come back. The vegetation, the air, the birds, the animals. We didn't think anybody was alive outside of there. We were very surprised when we had gone out that there were human populations alive, but they were like, they reminded me of like going into Africa today and seeing the tribal people. You still have tribal people in Africa. This is what I was seeing. And all of the people that were out were indigenous. We were white. We were white people for being underground for so long. They were friendly, really friendly. The vegetation was nice and full coming in. I remember coming across Black people, and they were indigenous, and I remember they were holding a spear, and they were kind of tall. I'd say at least 6 foot tall. And we came on them, and we had something where, I don't know if it was built inside of us or what, but we could understand everything they were saying. And we could hear a bit of their language, and these translators we had inside of us would translate the language, and it would formulate, it was all AI, a whole language by them just speaking, and based on old syntaxes of languages, and it had every ability of every language before we had gone down under into the ground, to these shacks, these cities under the ground. And when we came up, we were talking to them, and we're like, where do you live? Are there a lot of you? And there was only pockets of humanity. And I remember that we were very naive when it came to these people. We didn't know anything. We didn't know how they survived. We didn't even know they were there. But I do know that some of them, because of the interactions with us, became hostile, because there was not just us, the common man that was coming up from underground, there were the controllers that were coming up, and they wanted to conquer everything above because they believed that was all theirs, and they were only letting it regrow because of what had happened, where everything got devastated, and that was all theirs anyway, and they were intruders. Yet they were the indigenous. These indigenous that we came across never once believed they owned anything. It wasn't about ownership. It was just about symbiosis of nature with them, working together as a single unit. And I do remember that some of them had said that they wouldn't have survived if it weren't for the ant people. Now, I'm having flashbacks of them talking about the ant people. Okay, so this didn't just happen in the Americas. This happened everywhere. I do know in my flashback, I was in Africa when I came up. I wasn't in the United States. I wasn't in Europe. I was actually in Africa. So this place with this memory was Africa. And that's why we were seeing these indigenous Black people everywhere. I remember that it was the underground dwellers, and it wasn't the common ones like me, because we were just the common. We didn't have any power. We just existed. We got, it's really strange. Our food did not consist of fruits and vegetables. Our food consisted of fungi, different kinds of fungi. That's all we ate, okay? We looked like humans, but we looked like this, white. We've lost all of our pigment. Our eyes went to light color. Everyone that went under the ground at one time was the indigenous that went under the ground. We suspected nobody survived. And when we went topside, we were stunned to know anyone survived, let alone were thriving. Africa, the entire Africa was complete vegetation. There was no sand. It became sand because this was a prior reset when the first whites, which were indigenous, were reintroduced into this reality. And I don't know if this was the very first reset or the second reset. I don't even have a time frame on that. I know it wasn't the last reset. It was one of the prior resets. And this is when white people came out. No children, zero. So I wanted to add that in when we start talking about now what was going on with the orphan trains, what was going on with humanity as a whole, and how many people actually survived topside. And I'm going to tell you, most of humanity did not survive topside. Even with this last reset, this program of repopulation has always been the thing. There is more stuff underneath of our feet with civilizations below us. They're not only human, but they're a faction of things. There's more stuff below us than there is topside. This is considered topside. And one of the main things is they wanted to repopulate topside. So when everyone started coming up from under the ground, the white people, they started coming up. White people just showed up on the scene everywhere. Because when you take populations and you throw them underground for a really long time, they turn white, period. They're not a species in their own. No, they are the indigenous. This is what happens when you change a species because of conditions. So this is why white people showed up everywhere. They just showed up. All of these places, and I can give you pinpointed places. Did you ever notice that everywhere you go, there are always gazebos? They're everywhere. These were the entrances to underground. Then they just placed a gazebo over top of it if they didn't just cover it over. Every gazebo, if you go back and look in every part of Antiquitech, the gazebos, those were the entrances to go underground.
Very interesting. Very interesting. As you was talking about that, it reminded me of Adam and Eve. Now, I don't believe the Bible story is correct particularly, but it gives us an idea or a flavor of something that Sonia's just been talking about. So if we go to the Adam and Eve repopulation story, the group of people that came up from underground were not called, it wasn't a man called Adam and it wasn't a woman called Eve. It was the Adamu people, the Adamu. And they came up from Eden, which is an enclosure, means enclosed area. We assume it's an enclosed area above ground, but really, why can't it be an enclosed area below ground called Eden? The Adamu came up, and that's when they first met Eve, because Eve is actually heaven. And it's the first time they saw the stars, and that's where we get the Adam and Eve story, because they were banished from Eden, but they weren't banished. It was their time to come up and repopulate after a reset, because it's certainly provable that there are many underground cities around the world, particularly in Turkey, which would have held at least 10,000 people at a time through long periods of time. And it makes perfect sense that they would have eaten fungi, mushrooms, and bits and pieces like that that would have sustained them. So really, really interesting. Now, we have a history of resets going along. Noah was a classic reset, and that happened in 2039 BC from memory. So 2039 BC was the Noah flood. There's also one that's a bit later called the Ogygian deluge, which has fundamentally created mountains and all sorts of stuff going on. And some of the populations would have been trapped underground at this point because they would not have been able to get out. But the technology that was held there by the dumb elites would have then been used. Now this is very interesting that we get the story of the fallen angels or the 200 watchers, and the 200 watchers are the Anunnaki, and there are 200 blonde-haired, blue-eyed people with beards. And they came from under the ground out of a mountain or the So they came down, but they came down from a mountain, an entrance, and as they came down, they had all the technology with them and fundamentally took over the world from the
Mm-hmm.
indigenous peoples that were there. And
Mm-hmm.
all the indigenous peoples would have been dark skinned with no ability to grow facial hair.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this in modern day Egypt, or Egyptian stuff rather, where the pharaohs all had beards.
Mm-hmm.
And the Adamu, or the 200 Watchers, which were probably the same people, but the Adamu would have been the controllers. Sorry, the 200 Watchers would have been, or the Anunnaki would have been the controllers of the Adamu people, and
Mm-hmm.
they were the ones with the technology, and they had beards. And so, what we have in Egypt is that all the pharaohs had beards, and later, when the Adamu or the 200 Watchers or the Anunnaki left, all the same kind of people, or they bred into the population. What we have
Mm-hmm.
in Egypt is that the pharaohs would wear a wooden beard to
Yep.
denote their power.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this also in dragon mythology,
Mm-hmm.
where the dragons have beards.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Same
Beard.
people, same story, same everything that goes on there. Okay, so this seeing and this story replicates. Now,
Absolutely.
to take us into more of a closer period of time, we were talking before we left on part one about 1774 and the likelihood of a big reset that wiped out most of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from my research, the population of the United Kingdom did not reach sustainable levels until the mid to late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the ward of Great Yarmouth, which is a coastal town in East Anglia, it's known that the Crown held auctions and resold empty properties back to builders to re to get these buildings ready for repopulation. Now in Norfolk we have a huge amount of building going on around the late 1800s. Terrace
Mm-hmm.
buildings everywhere, unbelievable. But when we look at Great Yarmouth as an example, we have bay fronted terraced houses that have all had a basement in them dug out from under the ground with walls that are the same, with steps that are all the same. Now,
Mm-hmm.
in 1889, when these properties were sold, the council, so they were sold by the Crown, they were empty properties sold by the Crown, as in the Royals or the Committee of the Crown at that point, which would be part of the Committee of 300. They were sold back to builders, and the builders had to rebuild these houses to certain specifications. And if you go round Great Yarmouth, or if you pick any street fundamentally in Great Yarmouth and Google, like the street view, you will see all the basements are exactly the same. All the bay-fronted basement buildings are exactly the same. They were all dug out the same because that was the requirement of the council for them to be done. So when builders brought them, they had to be done. What's very interesting is in 1889, when one of these lots was sold in the ward of Great Yarmouth, and I don't know how many houses there are in total, maybe 6,000, 10,000, certainly no more than 10,000. I would say 6 or 8,000 at the most, maybe less. I've never been able to find out because there's no information suddenly about that. You can't find it, okay? But what we do know via the legal documentation of the time, that over 2,000 empty properties were sold in 1889 in the ward of Great Yarmouth.
Hmm.
That's a lot of empty houses
Yes,
that have
it is.
been repopulated suddenly, and all of a sudden we have all these people to go into these houses.
Right. Hmm.
Hmm.
And we don't have enough adults to be having this kind of people.
No, we don't.
So we'll go into the orphan trains, and in all of these places where there would be a big gathering, and they would call it, it's like a convention center. And
The great
one of
expeditions, isn't it?
the
The,
expeditions, one of the main things that was always there was incubators and babies. And you can get as many babies as you can handle to help you run your household, your farm, your business, it doesn't matter. And then we start seeing pictures of all this old, huge machinery with children hanging all over them. Little children trying to run huge machinery. In no world would that ever be plausible. First off, that there were no gauges or guards or anything for these children. A lot of children ended up getting killed in this machinery. That's number one. So there was no value for life. There really wasn't. They were pumping out babies like they were the Cabbage Patch Kids. They were producing and pumping them out to do one thing, and that was to repopulate. And from that point on, it was expected that these adults who had never had children, never had anything like this, there wasn't even accidental births, would end up with these babies. And then the next thing you know, these children start growing up. And the next thing you have is unwanted pregnancies and lots of unwanted pregnancies because the population before them that came out from under the ground were sterile. They were all sterile. They didn't even know how to take care of these babies. They had to have classes where the incubator person who was giving these babies away would actually have to have classes where they would teach these women how to be mothers, how to diaper a baby, how to feed a baby, what to look for to help baby in all kinds of circumstances. In what world would a mother or a woman not have the ability or knowledge to take care of a baby? A lot of this is instinctual, but it wasn't for them because what were those beings? Who were those beings that were so sterile coming up from under the ground? I believe they were also a set of clones. Clones,
100%. Yeah.
which explains the white.
Now, Sonia has put some really interesting stuff on the table there. So let's have a little bit of a meal out of that one. So we have indigenous people that survived the resets of
Mhm,
1774.
mhm,
The people that survived were source player people.
mhm,
Direct connection to source. I'm getting goosebumps on that one. Oh, so they were sentient beings with source connection. And what we have is the dumb elites coming up from underground
mhm,
with all the technology that they've taken with them. And one of
mhm,
those technologies is cloning.
mhm,
It's very interesting. There's a patent in the patent office from 1891. That's 1891 when they patented it eventually of cloning human beings. Now, I'm certain that that's been going on way before then, but
Oh, yeah.
they, but they've created their legal framework by them and their legal documentation and how they control via corporations. And so they've instigated cloning. And in the Chicago World Fair of 1891, there were 3,000 cloned babies in one hall alone.
Mhm,
And as Sonia says, you could take these babies and you could put them into an incubator and you could grow them on. And if you
Mhm.
think that's really far-fetched, look at some of my back catalogue on my channel, Alternative Interactions, where I show this happening and I show that this was going on up until into the 1920s.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, for me, I always like to think, well, why? What's going on with that? Why would they do such a thing? What's going on? What is the reason behind this? So Sonia and I were having a discussion about this why, because my mind, I know why. Now, one of the things that I've came up with about this, and I actually talk about this in my show that I did 6 months ago, 7 months ago. That's how far back it is. We have an indigenous source connected population that are sentient beings and they have the ability to create anything and everything within this realm.
Mhm.
We have the dumb elites coming up who can't create or do anything, can only manipulate.
Mhm.
They have always known that this period in time that we're in now is coming
Mhm.
up. They've had foresight of this, you know, and it's very naive of us to think, oh no, they've only just discovered it through
No.
Operation Looking Glass and all that. No, no, not a chance. They've always known this was happening, so they've had to have a plan. Now, the only way that these non-organic entities, the Fibonacci sequence, which is fundamentally what we're talking about,
Mhm.
can get out of this realm is to piggyback or be inside a sentient being.
Mhm.
And they've never achieved it yet.
Not yet.
So,
No, you will.
never will. No. So what they did is they created a load of clones. And clones are what we would now kind of talk about and call NPCs, non-player characters.
Mhm.
But what's very interesting is a sentient being, a source connected main player character, can have children that are both main player sentient being connected to source players as well as NPCs.
Yep. No problem. And it happens more than often. Usually, most people don't even have, um, most people have NPC children. I always know, and if you go back, since we're in this schematic, we're in this system, all of the bodies are organic machines. Okay, they all start off as NPCs, but what comes into the NPC will identify what that avatar will be able to do, because you are not ever your avatar. It's like going into a parking lot and there's all these cars for sale. Say there's 1,000 cars for sale, every make and model, but there's only you, one you. You get to go pick any one of those cars. They can all run as long as they have gas, as long as their batteries working. They all have the ability to do one thing, and that's be the car. But who's in the car? That's the difference. That's these avatars. Who's in the car? Or is it running on an AI automated system like they're doing now? So all the cars have the ability of running on AI automated systems, or you can go get into the car and then you run the car. And then the car goes places it's never been before because it's not on that track.
Brilliant analogy. So fundamentally, what Sonia's talking about is a Tesla self-driving car is an
Mhm.
NPC, as
Mhm.
we're in our very low-tech 1950s, 60s car that has to be turned and brake pedaled and everything else like that. That's the source player inside the vehicle analogy. Now, what I believe firmly, and we can get Sonia to look at this, remote view this, is all these Teslas were created, but with the ability to breed with the non-Teslas, okay? We're using the car analogy here. We have electronic Teslas and non-electronic cars. Both of them are cars, so both of them you can take parts off. You can take a wheel off each one of them, swap the wheels over, and you still got a car. Okay? Both can breed with each other and produce children.
Mhm.
Why do we now have non-player characters, or why do we now produce Tesla cars as well as old-fashioned cars? Let's call it that way. Okay?
Mhm.
Because the dumb elites created a clone army to breed with the indigenous peoples so that they could water down and take over the realm and remove the player characters from being the power brokers of this realm, the true power from this realm. And that's why today we have source players having non-player characters and main player characters as children, because they watered us down with genetics that mean that we can have either or. Now, Sonia, can you look at that and confirm what you see from that? And are we right? And is there any more that we're missing, please?
You're absolutely right. And this is why there was such a push back in the 20s. Have children, have children. The only purpose a woman is to bear children. This is why there was no birth control, because they needed more avatars, because you can flood out. It's like taking a drink. I'm going to give you a little bit of whiskey, and then I'm going to fill it with water. That's the ratio. This much whiskey to this much water. You have just lost the potency of the whiskey. Boom, water. And then we'll throw ice cubes in to make it cold for you. But other than that, that's why women, when they had first come into this realm, the ones from under the ground, they did not know anything about rearing children. They didn't have the sterile. They were created just to keep the population going underground. Sterile, 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 coming up above ground. Now, the watchers, as you put it, they knew that there was a huge possibility that there were big pockets that they didn't know about of humanity. Okay. They are in the mountains. So that place that we came up from was the mountain. When the door opened, it just looked like a piece of the mountain moved. But that is a facility, and there's facilities everywhere because there's more going on under the ground than anything. This is why there was this big push. Okay, it's okay to flood the entire realm out with all these clone babies, but you also need to have procreation from the real source beings. So you flood because you need to have boots on the ground to run the machinery to get topside going again. Because the only thing that you're concerned about is you're doing the long term. You want humanity to get to a point where AI can crawl out from under the ground and be with you up here. But when you start from ground zero after a reset, you've got to repopulate on the bottom of the level. And then from there, you start introducing known technologies to humanity. We can just get smart all of a sudden and learn all this, and now look at us with our spyware and our drones and our infrastructure of AI all around us. No, this was fed to us, but it needed to have a certain amount of boots on the ground people to build this infrastructure. So that was another reason to put the clones out. There wasn't enough indigenous. And you cannot train the indigenous to do what you want when they've only ever had freedom. They would rather die than to give their freedom away and work. No.
And that, and
Especially
that,
for an agenda that has nothing to do with them and their
yeah,
reality.
yeah. And that's why we see the indigenous populations of Australia with the Aborigines, Native American Indians, who
Mhm.
would have been both black and white or
Yes.
dark skinned. It would have been a mixture of all of the people that was survived a
Mhm.
cataclysm, because there has always been black and white people
Mhm.
together and Chinese type people living in harmony.
Of course.
It, it's always been the way. Now,
It's never ever been about work, work, work. It was always about quality, quality, quality of life. quality of nature. Everything was based around nature.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So when Sonia talks about quality of life, I can quote an example of this very easily from my research, and this is something called the Feudal Act in England, the English Feudal Act. I think it came in around 975-ish. I keep forgetting the date when it came in, but fundamentally, the Feudal Act came in where it stated that everybody, particularly men, had to work 40 days a year for their food, clothing, and shelter from the system.
Mm-hmm.
40 days per year. And the feudal system was only repealed in 1660, as once Parliament and the English kings had been taken over by the Zionists from Holland. Again, look at my the UK has no money. I explain all this, and it was only at that point from 1660 onwards that people were forced to work more than 40 days per year. And then we have the Cestui Act in 1666 in the UK that then said that after 7 years, everybody was dead overseas and they were corpses, which then meant the new corporations that were being brought in by the Zionists could come in. And then we have in 1693 the first debt bonds issued, and in 1694 the Bank of England's created to enslave everybody financially while they're working 365 days a year.
There you go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But this was only capably managed by creating a clone system.
Yep.
Now,
Well,
we have
you may,
orphan trains, don't we, Sonia? We mentioned the
yeah,
orphan trains. Now,
well,
there were so many clones coming up at one point that they didn't know what to do with them.
mhm. We had clone centers everywhere. This wasn't just in the UK. This wasn't just in the Americas. This wasn't just in Africa. It was everywhere. Centers would focus on cloning that type of people. Okay, so it isn't just whites, it isn't just blacks or Orientals. It's everything. The cloning centers were everything. There were only a couple indigenous peoples that the indigenous themselves were not cloned. So the aboriginals in Australia never cloned. Certain Chinese were never cloned. Certain American Indians, the Mayans, the Aztec, they were not cloned. India, they were not cloned. Now, they did have cloning centers everywhere, and they were mimicking some of the population, but it was a mimic, just to keep that in check balance so that everything wouldn't just be clones, okay? It just wouldn't be white.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at it, the white clones that came up from under the ground, they were made differently. Um, there were certain aspects that they needed to have in clones under the ground that are in white people even today that are not in the indigenous. If you ever notice about indigenous people are always hooked with nature. White people are the furthest from nature you can get. They are. They're structured to be builders. They build, they build, they build, they build. Tear down nature and build, 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 build. Because they've been programmed to almost act like a swarm.
Worker ants, aren't they? They're worker ants. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that's the difference between the cloning of the white people and the indigenous of everyone else. They work in symbiosis with nature, where white people, they don't. They think of this is where your corporate world can come in too. This is where you can actually establish things, objects, goals of materialism because of this concept that was put into these cloned beings. Because they're driven on a different agenda.
Yeah, totally. Now, when we start looking at the orphan trains, they happened in America because the central part of America was empty of people fundamentally.
Oh, yeah.
Also happened in Russia. So
Hmm.
the port areas were very important because the British Navy at that time could could transport, they say they're transporting slaves. They weren't, they were transporting children. They were transporting youngsters around the world to
Hmm.
ports to then be moved across and moved on. And if the youngsters were too young, they'd go into incubators, be grown on to then be sold on in slave auctions. The
Hmm.
majority of slaves sold on were often white,
Hmm.
because they were the easiest ones to replicate, quite frankly.
Hmm.
Why not? So when we look at New York, over a 3-year period, over 250,000 children were given up for adoption and
Hmm.
transported out of New York into the central part of America.
Hmm.
The official narrative is that New York was full of prostitutes, ladies of the night, and they gave up their children so they could continue working.
Yeah, no.
But if you Google the population of New York at the time of the orphan trains in mid 1850s and such like, you will find that every single lady who was in New York would have had to have been a prostitute, would have had to have been pregnant, and would have had to have given up their child. And the
Hmm.
likelihood of that is absolutely zero.
Yeah. And don't forget, there wasn't even enough women to even do this. And they would have had to stay pregnant for years. And who's supporting them? What, on the street? They just get pregnant and how who's feeding them? There wasn't even enough men to do this with the amount of limited women to create. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. Another one of their stories that falls apart is Sydney, and this is fascinating. So
Yeah.
Sydney is founded by the
Hmm.
British Empire, just founded,
Hmm.
and I think it's something like 3,000 women, children, and men go on to sort of like Sydney, and I think it was 1,000 men to 1,000 women and 1,000 children fundamentally, roughly. Well, it might have been a few less men than that. So it's fundamentally women and children. Now, while they're in Sydney, they can't feed themselves, and they're totally reliant on ships coming in yearly to feed them. But their main industrial source of what they did was brick making, and 3,000 women, children, and men fundamentally built Sydney over a 2-year period or 3-year period. And in one of those years in between, the ship sank and they all nearly starved to death. But they were making and built Sydney.
Of course. Because don't you know, little children, they have all this skill set, and women who know nothing about building, they have skill set. And who's going to come home and make lunch, dinner, what have you? Because you must have had children on your hips while you're making bricks, and you must be eating the bricks because you don't need to worry about feeding those children or feeding yourself or having a housing or shelter or washing clothes or just having survival skills, because all you're going to do is make bricks. It's going to
Absolutely.
last about one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
So
bricks are going to be made.
we can kind of see the fragility of this. And also another thing that's worth noting is in a lot of old photographs, there is no people in the photographs.
Oh.
But when we do get the old photographs and you see the old photographs, they're all white.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Watch that.
dressed the same. They're all
Mm-hmm.
dressed the same. And the women have got big hats on and they're
Mm-hmm.
sheltering from the sun.
Yep. Because when you come from underground, that sun is toxic. You don't have your skin has not developed, it has lost its melanonin to deal with the sun. And the only thing you need to protect is your vital organ. Because, oh, but don't you know you're going to be out there making bricks? No. First off, you don't even have the body physique for anything physical because you didn't have a physical life.
Yeah.
You're going to be frail and small. People have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over the last century, 2 centuries. Do you remember when people used to be 4 feet tall? We're not that anymore because being topside means we're having a different atmosphere. It means that we're having different conditions and elements. And we're like a little goldfish. You take us out of the little bowl and throw us into a river, we're going to get bigger. And then we end up in a huge lake, we're going to be enormous.
Yeah. Yeah. So an interesting fun fact is the average Roman legionnaire was 5'2" tall.
Yeah, tiny. Tiny. I could tower over them. 5 foot 6.
Yeah. So so we probably average 5'10", 6 footish nowadays around that period. So we are so much taller and bigger than them, despite the toxicity of our environment, the poor food quality, and everything they're doing to us. So it's really quite an interesting thing. So doppelgangers.
I was just gonna say, let's go to doppelgangers. It's a whole new ball game here. So, as you started off in the very beginning on part one, you were talking about this man who had a doppelganger who both ended up in what was it, some prison,
Yeah,
Lebanon or something.
yeah. Oh, where was it again? Let me just find that. It, um,
We have
so
a history also of doppelgangers throughout our history, just in the last 100 years, and even going back from there. Doppelgangers. Now, when you look up doppelgangers online, you're going to get all kinds of variations of what a doppelganger is. Some of them say it's a spirit from the realm who manifests itself into this realm. There's a lot of German mythology on doppelgangers because I think it was really recognized in that region first. I mean, it was throughout all of the snow globe, but they really emphasized on these doppelgangers in Germany. Um, a lot of it is they're metaphysical coming into the physical, but I find there's more than that even. And it goes down to a process of cloning. When you make a clone, every clone might look identical, but their fingerprints, they're not identical. There are little teeny little signs of what, you're not quite right. Oh, yes, there he is.
that's William West and Will West, and they both look identical. Okay, and this
Mm-hmm,
is why they had to bring in fingerprints in 1903
mm-hmm,
because they both look identical and have the same name.
mm-hmm.
How can you do that? How can you get a doppelganger? I mean, the chances of that in nature must be fairly slim, you know?
It would be very slim if it was natural. So I want to talk about this reality being a schematic, being a matrix. You and I are comprised of thousands of frequencies. We were talking earlier where you said there was a schematic, a blueprint, something like this, where there was programs of one face that could be made into all these different faces. Would you
Yes,
like to talk about that real quick?
yes. So we are living in a holographic realm, which is a toroidal field as well. Okay. And the toroidal field is a energy frequency that comes out. And when you overlay a frequency on top of a frequency on top of a frequency, what you do is you create something that could become solid, like we are. So, for instance, it could be 8, 6, 10 frequencies that are needed to create the human body and us as humans. And all this is a frequency band on top of each other
Mhm.
via a toroidal field of consciousness. that comes in via our source connection.
Mhm.
Um, Now, when we look at DNA and we cut the end off the DNA and we turn it, so we've got the circle part of the DNA, not the helix, but we turn it that way. It looks very much, if not identical, to the round church windows
Yes, the cymatics.
because it's cymatics.
Mhm.
And the cymatics overlaid via our DNA via the frequency, because I'm convinced that DNA is only a frequency receptor
Mhm. Mhm.
that creates a somatic, and that somatic creates a vibrational frequency. The quicker something vibrates, the softer it is.
Mhm.
Okay. The less something vibrates, the
Mhm.
harder it is. So
Yep, the
a
more
rock
dense.
will vibrate, but it will vibrate at a very low frequency,
Mhm.
very slow, as we're
Mhm.
vibrating like this.
Mhm.
And it's this mixture of vibrational frequencies amongst the toroidal fields of the overlapping that creates the reality we perceive as being a real, solid, living realm.
Mhm. That's perfectly put.
Thank you.
That's why when you change your frequency, all of a sudden, whole people, not so much structures, but people will wink out of your reality because you're no longer on the same frequencies and they just aren't there. Yet you're still here. This, like when you die. Say you're gonna die, because we're gonna live and we're gonna die. We're gonna be born and we're gonna die. Those are the two things that are guaranteed. I'm going to leave this avatar that's running on a certain frequency. I'm going out of it. I will still look the way I am because I'm holding memory of. Okay. It isn't because that's what I am. I'm holding memory of. You can also see this where people have gotten body limbs taken off and they're through Kerlarian photography. Say my arm got chopped off. I still have an arm. I got a hand. And this is where you have these ghost problems. Like my hand is itching, but I don't have an hand. My foot is itching. I lost my foot.
Yeah.
So that part of us, this that holds the memory, and we are the ones that hold the memory because we want something tangible. This is identifying us because of being in the avatar where you only get less than a percentage of who you are. We become very needy. So you leave your avatar, you're looking at your avatar, it's very solid. You can put your hand through the avatar because your frequency has dialed up. And for that, as far as you're concerned, it's the dream, the shadow. It's not even there. You can go through it. It's not even solid for you anymore because you're vibrating so high that that solid thing is out of your spectrum of reality.
Like a ghost, isn't it?
Walk like a ghost. They can perceive us, but they can't interact with us. Just like we're so dense, they're also moving faster than we are. They can slow or speed up their reaction with something, but we can't because we're stuck in these avatars and they're so dense. We're on a set frame of experience. So we're moving slow. To them, they can zoom around us. They can even sound like a bee or a buzz or something. A high pitched noise is what they normally sound like. When you hear those high pitches, it could be somebody around you trying to talk to you. We can't perceive it because we're in these low dense avatars and they're going too fast and they just can't. It's like I can see in 200 frames, but you're at 1500 frames. I can't see you.
Yeah. Yeah. We have so many things around us that are living beings that we have no perception of because we can only see such a narrow bandwidth. We can only hear such a narrow bandwidth. And this is why sometimes a dog or a cat will see something and follow it, and the cat might react to that thing because the cat sees in a different bandwidth, and so the cat can see something else that we physically can't. So,
So when I think of doppelgangers, I think of which doppelganger? Is it the doppelganger that is a clone? Is it the doppelganger that is the metaphysical, like the Germans believe it is, where it can come into physicality because this is a matrix and it can be a double of. And this matrix also creates, Dolores Cannon call them backdrop people, where they're here for a moment and then they're gone. Those are doppelgangers. This matrix has a limited, not a finite, but a limited amount of frequencies to work with. So say you have a set parameter of this many beings. Let's say I've got 2,000 faces and body styles I can create, but there's 8 billion people. So you're going to take bits and pieces and you're going to add them and you're going to subtract them. And out of these frequency, you add one more frequency or take away a frequency or adjust a frequency. And then people can look similar, but not the same. The doppelgangers look identical because a pattern has been repeated.
yes, brilliantly put. Brilliantly put. So I can remember as a child in the 70s, they did something called photo fits for criminals. And they had X amount of facial shapes, X amount of noses, X amount of eyes, mouths, chins. And they could slide these in, and from only maybe 50, 30 eyes, noses, mouths, or whatever it was in the early days, they could slide all these things in and they could create a face of a criminal who would be semi-recognizable to that person from only X amount of
Mhm,
shapes. And it's the frequency, vibrational frequency. So as Sonia said, there's not a finite amount of frequencies, there's bands of frequencies,
mhm,
which is fundamentally why cats always look like cats,
mhm,
because a cat's frequency is kind of set. Now the coloration will be different, the
mhm.
sizes might be slightly different, but the cat looks like a cat is a cat is a cat. And they
Yeah.
all look fundamentally the same. They might have a slightly longer nose if they're a different breed, because man has interbred two different frequencies together, but
Mhm,
fundamentally look the same. So for us, there is a limited amount of energy in this realm. This
mhm,
holographic universe, this toroidal field of consciousness only has an X amount of energy within it. And so
mhm,
that's why it can only create certain types. And those certain types will look the same given the frequency polarity. Now, I was talking to Sonia scientifically wise about this earlier. And in part one, you might have seen it very quickly of a slide of the double slit heat experiment. And this
mhm.
explains kind of how it works in a 1D version. So would you like me to explain that in the scientific, Sonia?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So, um,
Farscape.
yeah, Farscape. That we're going to get onto Farscape in a minute. I can trust us. Right. Now, we have two systems running in this realm. We have the crystal spiral, the crystalline code, which is the creational energy, and we have the Fibonacci sequence, which is the malware. It's the overlay. It's the thing that is feeding off us, our energy. But they both look very, very similar. And if this was on its side, you would see a snail shell. Or if this is the top of a tree, you'd see the shape of a tree or a flower. They look very, very similar, which is how they've kind of um, deceived us. Okay. But it's very interesting that axis 7.7, they're very similar. They then split off, and the Fibonacci sequence can only grow if it feeds off something, as the crystal spiral, which is the creational energy of this realm. We are crystalline, we're crystal energies. And when we go to human design, we have 64 gates, and 64 is a crystal creational energy number. And we have something called Godheads that create the outer part of it. and there is 16 of those, which is another crystalline energy number. Okay, don't want to go too deeply into this, but this is the daisy of death, or the Metatronic cube, or the flower of life, as they would call it, but it's really not. It's part of the grid that creates this, and from this we can see the Jewish Star of David, or the Star of Rembrandt. It also creates squares and cubes, which is the black cube cult, which is the externalization of our power. So what I'm fundamentally talking about is the unnatural Fibonacci that came in, and the original creational energy of this realm. There's a 10 system, 10 tree system, and a 12 tree system. The 12 tree system has positive and negative charges, so it can grow organically and naturally, as the 10 grid system, which is the Fibonacci, does not. And so it has to feed on something else to grow. And here we can see. So this would be the Kabbalah, the Merkaba. All of this comes from this system. And here we have it in math. So the Fibonacci sequence looks like this, and the crystalline code, when drawn on paper, looks like this. And we can see it's got a twin system of positive and negative charge, as this does not. So for the Fibonacci sequence to grow, once we've got the initial boost out, to get to 2, it goes 1 plus 1 is 2. To get to 3, it has to feed on 1 plus 2. To get to 5, it has to feed on 3 plus 2 to create 5. We are part of the number set that feeds on to grow. So that's the energy the the demonic feeds on. This is AI. This is the demonic AI system. As the crystalline system, because it has the positive and negative within itself, can grow organically. So 1, 1, 2, then it goes to 4, to 8, to 16, 16 the number of Godheads, to 64, which is the number of centers within the human body, part of our human design system. Now, what's very interesting, and something I put together a while ago, sorry, that's sacred geometry, which really is not. We have cubes. Fibonacci creates cubes, which when we have a cube, it opens up and creates a cross or Star of David or such like. But what I put together was something called the double slit experiment. Now, the double slit experiment is you're firing particle matter, light wave beams, whatever it is, through 2 slits. When you look at it, you get 2 single lines on the back wall, which is what we'd expect from 2 slits. But when you don't look at it, it creates an interference pattern, a waveform pattern. And every single one of these is the same. So the double slit experiment was created in 1801 by Thomas. Can't remember his last name, but it was first done Thomas Young in 1801. Now, what I've looked at is, if this is creational energy that we're seeing here, part of the matrix of our toroidal field. And fundamentally, what you're seeing here is a 2D representation of a toroidal field. What you're seeing here with the crystalline code is a 2D representation of a toroidal field. And what you're seeing here with the Fibonacci sequence is something completely different. And when we overlay the two, we can clearly see that the Fibonacci sequence has nothing to do with creational energy whatsoever. But the crystalline code, when overlaid, looks identical. If you widened out the waveform, you can see that the makeup of this system is here. You know, we have a triangle here, we have a triangle here, we have a squarey shape here, we have like a squarey shape here. It's all there.
Hmm.
So this is part of when we talk about waveforms creating laid upon each other to create us. Fundamentally, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about waveform creational energies that will create from us.
Absolutely. We were talking earlier, and I was telling you about the mitochondria. We have 250 mitochondria inside each blood cell. Some of us have more than that. And when we move, it goes on and then it goes back off, on, off, on, off, on, off. We need certain things for our mitochondria to stay healthy so it doesn't die. But what I had realized not that long ago was that every now and then I can see white specks by the billions all around me. And I realize that's the outside mitochondria. That's your double split experiment. It's the mitochondria, the building blocks to create everything. It's created us. It's the mitochondria that has gone inside these avatars to create the avatar, created from the outside of the simulation, which is the mitochondria, which is the double split experiment. It's one in the same.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, this is a big concept for you to take on. I do have a playlist on my channel called Chris Code Fibonacci Sequence, where I explain that fully. And I also have a little series I did probably 7 or 8 months ago now, flat, round, or neither, about talking about are we on a round thing, a flat thing, or neither. So these are concepts that take a bit of getting used to, but when you understand the basics of the concepts, you can then understand the creational energy of the realm, how we've been manipulated, and how this has all been changed by them. But what it also means is that because we're source connected players, connected to the creational energy of everything, we can create anything and change anything we want to. And
Mm-hmm.
that gives us ultimate power.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think before we end this video, I'm going to talk about when I went out of here decades ago. So we're gonna end it on this. Right now, we're going through a huge awakening. This is your 2020 vision. This is you becoming lucid in the dream. Um, I had about, I guess it's almost 30 years ago now, right around 30 years ago now, I had gone through some really bad trauma and I was done and I wanted out. And the next thing I know, I went to lay down, closed my eyes, and I was out of here. No, I didn't go into a dream. It wasn't a dream. I was physically, mentally, spiritually, soulfully out. And I opened my eyes where I was next. And that was sitting in a chair. I was one of three captains that were placed in this organic, living, crystalline ship. And when I woke up, I got out of the chair. The chair works as a stasis pod. It's all technology. Every one of us captains have our DNA in the ship to create the ship. The ship was literally created for us. It's something that you do. It's not something that you apply for. It is when you're creating these ships and you put some of your DNA into creating the ship itself. This is not just a job position. Don't think it's anything like here in this simulated reality. It's a whole different realm of how you live your reality because you are then connected to something which is a living organic being, as long as that organic being is still alive. And that more than one of us put the DNA in there to have this communication between the ship means that we also have communication between each other. This isn't just ship to person. This is ship to person to the other beings. This is not something done lightly. You have to go through a lot to get into a position to have this job. It's not really a job. It's a life course.
A calling, isn't it? A
Yeah,
calling.
the calling. So when I woke up, the first thing I was in complete shock that nothing was real. I've lost everything because this is so, that's why I always say, what is real? You're experiencing it. You break down to nothing but mental. You are nothing but mental thought. That's what you break down to. None of this avatar stuff is actually us. It's what we experience. So when I woke up, I had this severe quick disconnection, which is never done. No, when you come out of this, it's not like that. They ease you out of it so that you don't go through a complete mental shock because it's the worst thing to ever have. When I got, when I decided to come back in, which was moments, I literally went out, looked in the bay, saw what I saw. People were in pods. The other two captains were someplace in the ship. I don't know where they were. I wasn't thinking about them. I just saw their chairs were empty. And when I came back in, I did something where when I was first born, I came in without a shocker system. And I was snatched immediately after birth, and an artificial shocker system was put on me. It's not like everyone else. It's done in my biofield because they couldn't put it inside of the avatar. Just they can't do that. They don't have that ability. That has to be done in utero. But because I designed the body I was going into before coming in here, because we do have access to this reality, this sim reality, and we can create avatars outside of here, which this place and the corruption has no control over. Because don't think that inside of here it's got full control. It does not. That's how this avatar got created. I created it outside of here. So when I came in, I was snatched, artificial crap was put down, blocked down, blocked down. When that trauma happened to me and I popped out, and I knew that I should have come in completely 100% with full brain capacity, and that didn't happen because of what they had done. I took measures in my own hands and I did something with my ship where I am now connected to my ship. And if I need anything, I opened up, basically we're funneled down less than a percentage. I changed the program, took off the chakras again, not all of them. I did leave one chakra on, and that was the heart chakra, because I realized that when I come back into here, because I'm not 100% of who I am, that I have the ability to annihilate, and I would annihilate. I left that one chakra on for a security measure because you are not allowed to go in and do any harm. You have to change here, not here. And we're always told that the change must come from out here to here, when in reality, it comes here. That's the change. So I did leave that one chakra on, but I took everything else off. And I opened up the gate to my ship. And that's why I'm able to do what I do. It's not that other people can't do this, they can. The chakra systems lock you down because the second real energy beings have those chakras off, you'll do everything that I do and so much more because I'm not even at my full capacity yet. Because if I was at my full capacity, I could levitate, I could actually bilocate. I can't do these things yet because I left that chakra system on. I know a lot of you be like, why didn't you take it off? Because I'm not irresponsible. Because I know what I'm capable of doing while I'm here. And it's as simple as that. So, would you like to talk about the three-eye atlas?
Yes. So very quickly, we're just going to share the screen very, very quickly. And we're going to go to something called Farscape. Now, Farscape is a TV program um, of a different dimension, but their ship was an organic ship. It was an organic ship that was connected to a pilot via a real life sentient connection. And it was only the pilot that could fly the ship via its connection. And I'm sorry, I'm scrolling down trying to find a picture of the ship. It doesn't seem to want to show me a picture of it, but for me, that was the star of the show. This is the pilot of the ship, and it's kind of an organic type craft that they're in. See if I can find a picture. There we go. So that's what the craft looks like, and the craft could move and such like. So what Sonia's describing fundamentally is Farscape.
Hmm.
Now, we have Free Eye Atlas. Now, I've been shown and I know that Free Eye Atlas is not a solid craft. Free Eye Atlas is an organic machine, or three organic machines or so, or connection of organic craft connected together that come from a different dimensional frequency. And they have come in here, and I'm just using Free Eye Atlas as an example because there's an armada of them. Oh my God, there's more than you could shake a stick at. Unbelievable. But we'll concentrate on the Free Eye Atlas. Free Eye Atlas is coming in here. Free Eye Atlas is crewed by us.
Hmm.
The armada is crewed by us.
Hmm.
We are Free Eye Atlas. We are the crew running Free Eye Atlas. So the craft Sonia described, and I'm getting proper goosebumps on this. The craft Sonia describes is fundamentally a Free Eye Atlas type craft. It's an organic machine that's run by us, our higher selves, from a higher dimensional frequency.
Hmm.
Inside these craft are beings, us, but also inside these craft are clones. They are clones of us from a higher frequency who are not the same as the clones that were created down here in this 10th dimensional frequency via the Fibonacci sequence. These clones are not here to breed. These clones are here to protect us.
Hmm.
And what I see is at some point in the very near future, these craft are going to come in when our governments collapse, when our financial institutions collapse, and they're going to, and it's going to happen next year, 2026, without doubt for me. These entities, ourselves, our higher selves, are going to come in and we're going to take over the system that's been run by the dumb elites to ensure that the new system that comes up is a system of freedom for every player character that can then enable them to ascend out of this realm to where we should have been in the first place. Now, NPCs, I believe that they will be given an opportunity to connect to something, and there will be some form of technology that will protect those that want to come with us. The majority will not come with us because they are not programmed to and are not able to take that mental step that we're going to be taking. Okay? Now, when we look at what Sonia's experience is, and we look at TV programs like Farscape, and what I'm seeing and feeling, and others have been doing tarot cards on, crystal balls, we're getting a very, very clear picture of this kind of event happening. And oh my God, is it good? So we have nothing to fear about these craft because these crafts are being piloted by us. So
Hmm.
Sonia, have you got anything you'd like to add to that that you think I've missed, or you can add to that?
Okay. I've heard a lot of BS about Three Eye Atlas being run by reptilians. The reptilians are down here running things and have been for a very long time. They're not coming into anything. They've already been here. They're the taskmasters running everything now. That's not the reptilians. I saw something, somebody had put me into that direction of this famous remote viewer sees that this is reptilians coming in to take over. Uh, Too late. They're already here. They've been here since the beginning. They're from under the ground. They were a part of the system of the first reset. They're what was running a lot of things underground. It's those reptilians. They're the shape shifting ones, the ones that look like they're half human sometimes, and then they have a hard time holding their form. Don't think that that's them coming in. No. I wanted to add that because I've heard a lot of crap. You're going to have the bad guys always coming out and trying to point their fingers at people who are trying to wake up the world, like Karen Kingston or Anna or Maria Z, saying, oh, they're the bad guy. Well, then you're an idiot for falling for it. Because if you actually listen to what they say, it would just be like the three-eye atlas. What does your gut say? How do you feel? We have more opposition against us down here in this 3D reality. And at this point, there are more of them online. Remember that our web, our World Wide Web, is but the tip of an iceberg of the dark web. The web that we have had and has been introduced to us was only done so they could ensnare us down the road. It's always been the dark web, always, and it's been around forever, since the first reset, before the first reset. We came from high technology. We didn't come from caveman. No such thing as Darwinism. That's garbage. So we have to readjust, reevaluate. If it's too much for you, when you hear some of this stuff, step back, put it on a shelf and reevaluate it tomorrow, next month, next year. Don't dismiss anything out of hand. And when you hear a lot of negativity, you have to look and find out, where is it coming from? You have two worlds going right now. You have cyber world and you have your physical world. If cyber world gets to be too much for you, go out to your physical world, break from cyber world. And when you can handle it, you can go back in. But then try to find things of high vibration and frequency. Know that cyber world is run by AI. We have 70% plus bots in cyber world. So a lot of the things that you might be dealing with are going to be AI. That's another thing. And yes, three-eyed Atlas, who's coming to rescue you? You are. You are.
Yeah, 100%. Because if you think about this, we are connected all the way up to the top to source. We're source players. We have a
Mhm,
true clean connection.
mhm,
I'm getting goosebumps already on this. If we are tarnished with that clean connection
mhm,
via the AI Fibonacci sequence overlay,
mhm,
there's the possibility that that connection can be used as a roadway by the demonic
mhm,
to go up into our own higher selves,
mhm,
at which point time and space would collapse and the the end result would be the end of consciousness and the end of connection and the end of the creation. That it would all end. It would fundamentally all end at some point because the Fibonacci sequence that runs everything has to feed on something.
mhm,
And at the point it can't feed on anything, it
mhm,
collapses. And
mhm,
the collapse would be monumental and could create something like a black hole in space terms.
mhm. The one thing that will protect you, because I'm not having a problem saying I'm connected to my ship. If I need anything, it's there. It connects back and forth. You get to a certain frequency, this AI, even highest of this AI inside of the simulated reality, doesn't hold those frequencies. It simply can't make the jump. There's nothing to jump to.
Yeah, yeah, well put. So when we connect to our higher selves and our higher selves, we're coming in to save ourselves.
Mhm,
And at that point, they will enable us to vibrate at a frequency or change into more of a crystalline body that enables us to no longer be able to be chimeraed into
mhm,
a part Borg, part whatever. And even if you've taken some of this,
mhm,
that is going to fall out of your body. It's going to have
mhm.
no effect whatsoever because the
Um,
frequency, the technology, and sophistication that we have up there that's coming in to help us
mhm,
ourselves is beyond anything that they have in this little puny little realm. They
Hmm.
came from technology, but their technology never developed. Everything of the higher dimensional frequency has been allowed and been able to extend and grow and develop without all the control mechanisms that we've been under.
Absolutely, and well said.
Yeah, thank you. So we really are in a very good position, and we're using Free Eye Atlas as common language so everybody can understand what we're saying.
Mhm.
But Sonia's in a ship that's not Free Eye Atlas. It's a
No.
different ship, but that
Mhm.
ship's here already, and it
Mhm.
has been all her life. And at the
Mhm.
time in which it's ready, that ship will become online. It will be visible to people or to Sonia, and she will connect and interact in a very clean, clear way. And those beings on board will be then coming into this realm physically to do certain tasks that will take out the dumb elites and the bad actors.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I guess on that note, we've covered a lot.
I think we have. And I'm sorry if we made your brains melt a bit on that one. It's a lot to take in, as Sonia said. Rewatch it, put it to one side, come back a week or two later, rewatch it again. Because in the new year, in February, you know, March, January, July, the full work's going through, we're going to start seeing things ramp up, and we're going to start seeing certain things that, having watched this, will suddenly make sense.
Exactly, exactly. I think there is a part of the population from even last year that has now woken up to like, okay, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And as time progresses, every single moment, it's having an influence. It's like the 100 monkey effect. Because one of the main reasons we are here is to create that paradox to fix what happened inside of here, because this is a simulated reality and we could not completely fix it on the outside. It had to come on the inside. And
Yeah.
that's what we're doing here. We're creating the paradox because it should never have gotten this off balance. So,
Well put, well put, well put, Sonia. And I think with that one, we better leave everybody to sort of go, oh my God, what are they saying? But
yeah. So, everybody, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or night, wherever you are. And Gary and I will do something again in the future because we enjoy talking to each other and we
yes,
want you to be privy to the things we talk about.
we do, we do. And next time, what we're going to try and do perhaps is do something a little bit less formal, because often Sonia and I, we meet up and then we just got talking. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear some of the tangents and not craziness, but strangeness of us and the way our brains work in a
Yeah.
little bit of a less unfiltered way. So perhaps we'll do that next time, Sonia.
That sounds great because when Gary and I talk and we just have casual conversations about you have no idea what we're talking about, so many truth bombs come out, and we're not ever able to replicate that in that degree because then we go off in different directions because every conversation is extremely unique.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. So
So I'll guess on that. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.